right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Wendy Pulse Deep. And back with us for Baruch Part 2 is Troy. And joining us for this one is Spencer. So, welcome, guys. This is fun. This is the first time all three of us have been together on my channel. So, this is going to be a real fun. I'm really, really excited about this one. So, since we had to cut short the wisdom part in the last episode, and Troy messaged me right away, or we were talking afterwards, he's like, "This is really sad. We had to cut this so short." And I'm like, "No, we don't. We can just add another one because around here, serious numbers are just suggestions, and they never end up. We had one episode of Why Leviticus Matters, and ended up with like 5 or 6 of them, just because there was so much good stuff to talk about. So. We have around here. We have the numbers are a suggestion, so we're back for part 2 and diving into the wisdom and why wisdom really matters. So, I think first we'll start Spencer first. For anyone new who's watching, tell us who you are and why you think that the unappreciation of Baruch is something that people need to be a little more curious about.
Sure. So I am Spencer Owen. I run the podcast Trauma Informed Church Kid. I am a licensed counselor out in Colorado working with trauma, specifically with spiritual trauma. And I love the Bible and love reading the Bible. And that's kind of what we do on my podcast and what I do in all these other interviews and appearances that I do with everybody else. And as someone who has been raised Protestant my entire life, I have never, until you started diving into it, I had never even really encountered the Book of Baruch at all. And so that is probably my experience of how I would answer, like, why should we, appreciate it more? Well, because I was just shy of today years old when I first heard about it. So.
Well, Spencer was on my team of friends consultants when I was working on the 4th chapter of the series. So he got the end of Baruch, and now we're pulling him into the middle. So, but this is we're going to be talking about wisdom. So that'll be, I think, a lot of fun. And then Mr. Troy, it's your turn.
Oh, man. As someone that also spent most of my life in the Protestant evangelical world, the Deuterocanon or the pseudepigrapha or what's the word that I can't say?
Anagigaskomena.
That's the one I want to refer to. I just can't say it. Is, at first it starts off as a curiosity, and when you start looking into the history of the canon wars, you go, wait, this was at least a large part of it for the majority of Christian history. Maybe there's something in there that we miss. Maybe there is something in there that helps, because there is a seeming change in direction when we get to the New Testament, and the idea that, well, God was just silent, just never really sit well with me. God doesn't abandon his children. So he may not always show up in the same way. He may be more hidden or more veiled. But the idea that there was nothing to be said, and that there was, just looking into it, I'm going, man, as we got through the last episode, how much there is serious connection, like the pattern of intertextuality that you see everywhere else in Scripture. This has that thumbprint on it. And so for me, it's just been, why? I mean, at least read it. At least do that, and be a the thing that we always claim in the Protestant world, be Bereans, like study, see if these things are so, like, does this connect with both the Old and New Testament? You test it.
And even if one doesn't, approach it with a full on like the same level of submission that one would with, the typical canon, I just the idea that inspiration is like this on off switch, that like only 67 books are inspired and nothing else has even a iota of inspiration. And I know no one puts it in that way, but again, having lived in the Protestant world for 40 plus years, that is functionally the way it operates. It
Yep.
really is. Like anything that comes from the church fathers, Deuterocanon or pseudepigrapha or whatever, it's always looked as like, well, like there's this kind of immediate skepticism.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
here is to learn and listen from people who have a lot more exposure and awareness than I do. Yeah.
It's interesting for me now that you're saying that. I'm going, well, one, the lip service of how much we submit to the Bible, whether it's 66 books or more, it's usually just lip service. That's
Well,
what I
that's
found.
a whole other
Right. But
podcast.
the idea
Part
that
17.
right, that would be one of those things like this doesn't follow, because, well, how much are you submitting to what you have in the canon that you say you submit to? It's like, well, if that's the case, well, give it a chance, test it, and I think that you're absolutely right. So
All right. So I want to start with just kind of wisdom itself, because this section's all about wisdom, which plays a huge role in in the Book of Baruch. And it's going to play an even bigger role when we get into the Incarnation and the implications of why wisdom plays such a big role. And you hear a lot of people conversations and talking about what is wisdom. And this is one of those things that's kind of hard for us to get our heads around, because I think especially in a binary framework, Western mind, it's kind of like it has to be like this thing, or it has to be this thing, or if it's hard to kind of get your head around. It can have multiple forms at the same time. And I know, like when I was starting getting into this, and I hit this section and diving into trying to understand this wisdom and this path of wisdom that we see created by Baruch in chapter 3, I was like, okay, obviously my definition is wrong or too small or something, because that's not working in this case. And then you go back, okay, well, let's go back and look. And you get this one idea of concept. And this is again, not a binary, like either or, because there's a lot of overlap, which also adds, I think, to confusion in terminology and in concepts and the way that English and modernity works, the way that we think through things. It's kind of hard to get your head around this concept. And when you're reading, so you're like, okay, wisdom, well, one of the obvious place to go is Proverbs. And the book of Proverbs, for the most part, really walks through what's called Solomonic wisdom. And well, okay, what is that? Let's step back and let's define what that looks like. Okay. And as you read through most of the Proverbs, it hints at other kinds of wisdom, but really a lot of what Proverbs is talking about, it's this life advice and this whole chain of people leaving life advice. So it's, Solomon, and there's some in there that are written by his mother, or, and that are being left to Solomon. Like, here is what I've learned in my journey through life. So this is the kind of wisdom that we learn through interacting with the world. This is the kind of we get through learning, through science, through experience, through the day-to-day growth and maturing. So you don't start off your first day on the planet with any wisdom at all. And all of that is learned through experience, experiential learning, testing things, trying things out, all of that kind of stuff. So that really is, I think, the first type of wisdom. And I think a lot of people have that living in their heads. as what biblical wisdom, the definition of it is, it stays in that Solomonic wisdom. I mean, what do you guys think?
Yeah. The way that you just described what Proverbs is and how it's, the sayings of the wise practically given to a child. It is, Mother Goose, and like it's much more childish. Like, here, let me give you some basics, like at least organize your life through this and test these out. So yeah, I do think that there's a simplistic view to wisdom or Solomonic wisdom, which you see be challenged directly by Ecclesiastes, and you see that directly challenged by another book we're probably going to get into in just a second. But yeah, it seems a lot more simple and ground level, through experience. So,
well, I mean, again, I'm going to come in here with my Protestant perspective, but like that's always been the problem that I've run into as I've encountered the wisdom literature, which is an entire genre within the biblical text, and the fact that it contains all those pieces that you just mentioned, Troy, shows us that it's not like, and also the fact that it is structured in very poetic and pictorial kind of ways, shows us that it's not just simply, okay, here's this scientific logarithmic principle, and we need to put it all together, and then input equals output. And I know that it's very easy to read Proverbs that way. And I know, like, for me, for example, as a kid growing up, and even into, I forget when I did this. I think this was my first year out of college, or maybe my last year in college. I'm not sure. I did a study of Proverbs, just like, on my own, just kind of reading through it, going through it. And I realized that I'm like, this is contradictory because like in one place, it'll say like a wise man keeps his mouth shut. And then the next one, it'll say a wise man opens his mouth. And I'm like, what?
Or do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you will also be like him. Answer a fool as his folly deserves, that he not be wise in his own eyes. That's a verse apart. It's like,
yes.
Wait, what?
Yes. And for someone like me who was raised in the Protestant tradition and evangelical, I'm just going to say evangelical, because evangelical is more akin to my tradition than Protestant. Anyway, in the evangelical tradition, I've always been raised that like the Bible is clear, the Bible is obvious, the Bible is straightforward. All you got to do is just open it up, read it, and it will give you the truth. And that is a very unsettling experience for an evangelical to read contradictory, at least superficially contradictory instruction side by side. And honestly, I was reading Proverbs with the intent of like, I want to know wisdom. I want to know how, like, when it's good to open my mouth and when it's not. And I want to know, what this foolishness and wisdom is all about. And I walked away more confused than I came in. So, yeah.
I think a lot of those like contradictions, it looks like you say one thing in one verse, like the one Troy brought up, and then you say the next opposite in the next verse. I think you see this progress of this experiential, by experience, by not speaking to the fool in the experience, then you learn when to speak to the fool. So it's just this, like, I have matured and gained wisdom from doing the first part. Now I can do the second part. But that's hard to see if you're stuck on one definition and understanding of wisdom.
Right. I think that's what you just said, like, kind of broke that open for me, is that you have these two options. And Proverbs is giving you the options, but Proverbs isn't telling you which one to choose. It's like, what? And it's like, it's the same. It's when we ask God, Lord, I need patience. Well, he's going to give us a whole lot of times to choose or not choose to be patient. You're going to have to exercise that. That's what makes it bigger. And this is one of those things. It's like, oh, actually, wisdom is the layer beyond Solomonic wisdom. It's giving you the options. Here's two good options. Don't answer or answer.
Yeah.
That's the question. It's like, yes. Now
Yes.
figure it out. You need to go test that out. You're going to answer a fool according to his folly, and then you're going to realize, oh man, he sees me as in the exact same plight that he is. And then there's other times where you answer and it's just like, oh, it's through the experience of making those choices, you're like, oh, this is the type of fool I answer. This is the type of fool I keep my mouth shut to.
Mm-hmm. And this is eminently relevant for me as a counselor. So so for one, there is a type of therapeutic approach called DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, that takes the entire premise of it is that it's not that truth is found in the middle in some kind of golden mean. It's that truth is found in the holding two things in tension. The dialectic is the way that it's described. And the idea is that, and I mean, I literally just had a conversation with a client this morning about this very thing, because they were struggling with like, I want to do X and X is good, and I want to do Y and Y is also good. And they both have reasonable steps to take into this situation. So which one should I do? And I was kind of like, yes, you should do that. And they're like, what? I'm like, well, okay, well, here's the thing is like, you have to bring both in there. You have to bring this part of you and this part of you, and you have to hold them together. It's not about finding a compromise, because that tends to sacrifice both, but it's about finding a harmonious experience that allows both to layer on top of each other and be there together at the same time. That's the true thing, when you can both feel your emotions and not be swallowed up by them, when you can both listen to your emotions and not let them run your life. Like, doing all those things are super easy to say and really hard to do in real life. And as a counselor, that takes sometimes years of weekly one-on-one practice to get that right.
It makes me think about too. I think it was Dr. Zachary Porku was talking about this, and in looking at the epistemology of learning, that the Western mind kind of has this, it's either objective or subjective as a binary, one or the other. It has to be. But those are really subsets that are held together by experience. And experience shows you which is subjective, which is objective, and how to hold them together in a tension that doesn't put them at odds necessarily. So it really kind of like we'll get really into this in the Incarnation, which is why the Incarnation matters so much, is this experience in the middle that holds everything else in tension and balance. So I see Troy smiling over there.
Yeah, because you're speaking to things that I'm conversation this morning, and I'm just like, oh yeah, that makes sense now. So very good.
This is everything that we struggle with in the Western Christian world, particularly American evangelicalism. Faith or works, law or grace. Spirit or flesh. Like,
when they're supposed to be held in tension, it's not
correct,
because they're supposed to be united.
Yes. Yeah. Like this is Ephesians 2, where it talks about taking the two who were originally far apart and uniting them into one flesh, into one creation.
Yes.
And that's true of Jew and Gentile within the body of Christ. That's true of
male, female
works. That's true of male and female. That's true of absolutely everything. Like, it's a unity that does not erase diversity.
Right.
And I think that's where wisdom is. And that's why it's so freaking hard.
Right. And when there's different kinds of wisdom that are rolling around in scripture, because we've just talked about Proverbs and this Solomonic wisdom, that there's that experience that brings growth and tension and like holds stuff in tension. But that is very different. So if you try to jump from from Proverbs into Job, and you're looking at wisdom in the book of Job, those things don't make sense at all. And if you're standing there in Job 28 and he's revealing the cosmos, and it's just like there is nothing to hang any scaffolding to hang that on at all if you're looking at it from that Solomonic type of wisdom, because you've got, now we're jumping into what's more a Jobonic kind of wisdom. This is that wisdom that this is like God's wisdom, like for us is unattainable.
It's ineffable.
Yeah, it is this kind of hiddenness of wisdom that is beyond human capacity. This,
right.
And Job gets this look at it, and I think that Ecclesiastes is expressing, I learned all this stuff and it didn't get me to divine wisdom. And it's like, I should have just followed the Torah, which is a very interesting way for Ecclesiastes to end. But if you don't understand the bridge between the two, Ecclesiastes is like, well, this is really, really, really depressing. And all of a sudden, what? Torah? What is this doing on the end here? Like it doesn't make sense. But when you look at it, and it also is, it is this idea of the uncontainable. So we see this in the vision in Ezekiel 1, and how you got the vision of the chariots of fire, and God is all over the place. Wisdom is not containable in the same way. It's a really, I think, a really beautiful picture of how, like, there is this something we can't define that we yearn to, because Job 28 talks a lot about, I dug down to the center of the earth, trying to mine it, trying to get it out of nature, trying to observe it, trying to Solomonic, Jobonic wisdom. I'm trying to get God's wisdom out of creation. And then Baruch in this, in this is talking about, you can't, like we talked about in the last episode, you can't ascend to it. You can't buy your way up to it. You can't get promoted up to it. You can't, like become king and get it. You can't get, so you can't, there's no way. And it mirrors Job. You can't, there's no path you can take as a person to get to God's wisdom.
Creating a huge problem.
Yes. So now you've got this gap between us and God and the unattainable wisdom.
Well, and I want to kind of from a spiritual trauma standpoint, I want to just highlight that what you were saying of, you cannot just pluck a certain thing out and say, okay, here's the line, here's the Bible verse, just submit to it, just take it, especially in this wisdom literature thing. Because I mean, like, I have heard, I'll use one I've been taught, from Proverbs, train up a child the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. I have literally heard many times people in my life go, what did I do wrong, when someone walks away from the faith, one of their children? Because they took that Proverbs thing as a promise, as a direct statement of input, output, do this and you will do that. And granted, they're not crazy, because it seems that way. It looks like that if you just take it on the surface. And then I've also heard people go to Job and say, someone asks about, like, what, I just don't get why God would do this. This doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand this. It doesn't feel right. And then they go, who are you, oh man? Romans 9. Or they go, where were you when God laid the foundation of the earth, Job? And they take those things and they make them the totality of how to respond to this situation with quote unquote wisdom. And I think it's missing the mark wildly. And I mean, of course, we could do the same thing with Ecclesiastes. It's all futile, it's all vanity. Who knows whether the spirit of man goes up to the heavens or just goes down on the earth along with the animals. Like, you could do this all day. And so it's super, super important to take the entirety of the wisdom literature and the entirety of scripture all into account and say, that is wisdom, not just this one line is wisdom.
Yes. It's not a law. It's not.
That's it. That's it.
A lot of it is you, like the way that you're describing it, is taking something that was intended to be an invitation to look to God, because that is where wisdom comes from, and turning it into a bludgeoning tool for anyone that's struggling, anyone that's doubting, to silence the doubt. And like, I don't know, it's been probably 15 years now since I've been like, no, doubt is where the treasures are. Curiosity, like, is not the thing that kills the cat. Like, you need to be curious, and you need to be like not afraid of doubt, because you're going to find a treasure. Instead of bludgeoning people over the head, it's an invitation. Yeah. Who is this that darkens knowledge without wisdom, or darkens wisdom without knowledge? Yeah, that's in Job, but it's in the context of the Job's friends are sounding like the way that you started that description. I don't understand Job. Why would God allow this to happen? And they're coming up with reasons, because Job must have sinned, but I know that he didn't sin. Like, so how could this be? It's like, well, because this is the ineffable wisdom. This is the thing that's beyond. And it looks like, why would God make a bet? Right? It's like, there's so much. It's like, okay, take a step. It's supposed to be an invitation to wrestle with the idea that the rules you've been following in Proverbs don't actually always produce the intended results. Yes, idealistically, but they don't. So what do you do with that? Right? What do you do when it's not an equation? What do you do?
And that desire for an equation is just like so American, Western, scientific, rationalist, enlightenment, all those things rolled into one. Like, it's, and again, like, from my perspective and personal experience, I can't tell you the number of times where, again, people being taught this is the Bible. It just is so super clear, and all you got to do is listen with your eyes and ears open, and the Spirit will reveal truth to you. And they try that, and then it's still confusing. And then they get brought, and they bring it to people and say, hey, I just don't get this. And they go, oh, well, you must have a spirit of rebellion, or you must have some kind, or doubt is bad. You just got to have more faith, or something like that. And I just, it hurts my heart. It really does, because there is so much richness and truth and beauty in these passages. And we use them, we misuse them. It's sad.
I think that may be a good place to interject some more confusion in here is when you get, because Baruch and this is all throughout wisdom literature. There's also this interplay between wisdom and knowledge. So, so then it gets really confusing, because you've got wisdom, you've got knowledge, all this running around. This is crazy. What is happening here with all of this? And Baruch really kind of plays in with this linguistic and conceptual shift that starts to anchor wisdom in the material and covenantal life of Israel. So what in the world are we talking about? And what does that mean? Because that's a fancy phrase that doesn't mean a whole lot to a lot of people, because it's what are we talking about? So we're going to get a little bit nerdy in Greek, not my favorite thing to do, but Baruch's in Greek, so we have to. Right? So Baruch uses the word episteme. It's not the exact pronunciation, but I'm a Hebrew major, leave me alone. Okay. So Baruch uses episteme not as an abstract information. This is what we were kind of talking about with this Solomonic, is participatory knowledge that you acquire, that it becomes embodied a part of you. So that's the stuff you just know, and you can rattle off the top of your head because it's become ingrained and habitual, and you know what that is, right? And that I'm gonna hold off on the rest of that for a second. So let's kind of just throw our terms out here, and then we'll hash through what they are. So then the other word that he uses a lot is the word Sophia. and that's the Greek word for wisdom. And this word gets used when maturation takes the epistema and it matures it to where it becomes Sophia. So it signals this move from this Jobonic cosmic hiddenness that we can't get to a covenantal embodied reality. So it makes like epistema makes Sophia accessible. And we're going to get to how in a minute, and then there's two more words that we need to get into. So one of them is didymai, and this is a verb that it means to give in Greek. But in Baruch, it's very specifically marks a divine action of giving. So it has a direction. This is a word that has directionality to it. So like anybody who's familiar with American Sign Language, there are when you make certain, like you're talking, certain actions have direction to them. Hebrew does the same thing, actually, in its conceptual, the way that it works conceptually. So, I will give something to you. So there's a direction. There is a giver and a receiver, and there's a direct path. I can't give something to Troy by handing it to Spencer. That doesn't work very well, right? So something has to have a giver and a receiver. And wisdom is used, the didymai is very specific, that God takes the wisdom and gives it to Israel. So there's a very direct path and a direction which that goes. And then adoken is the other word, which means to wall or to like contain. And that is going to be how all of this progression is going to work. So those are our four words that Baruch really, really leans into. Okay. And then we have to kind of, I think, pause for a second there. First of all, was that fairly clear with the understanding of the Greek words there? You're muted, Spencer.
My bad. Could we get like an English gloss that works for those, just to kind of, or is it better just to stick with the Greek?
I think it's better to stick with the conceptual, because this is
good. Okay.
Yes, or just leave it at that, because I don't want to get into my opinion of lexicons and the theology and the way that lexicons work. So
sure,
because that's one of my big pet peeves. So I don't want to get distracted on that. We'll have to do an episode on lexicons one of these days, but not today.
Yes. So it sounds like there is maybe progression isn't quite the right word, but at least like a different domains of experience there, where like you have one, which is the episteme, that is like that kind of learned skill of like participating and practicing and building up a professional like radar almost. And like, I mean, I certainly encountered that starting off as a counselor. I mean, like I remember my first few years doing that. I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And the stakes are super high. Like, like when do I talk? When do I not? What do I say? When do I give advice? When do I, like, all those things. So it sounds like that's kind of where it begins. Is that correct?
Well, okay. So first, could we put a pin in that and jump to, that might clarify that a little bit, to jump to Torah and talk about Torah for a second, because that's a huge piece of how this progression works. So we really need to dig into Torah for a second to make all of this make sense, and why all these different words. Maybe we should have started there. I don't know, but we're getting there now. So Troy, you look like you're about to jump in with something.
Yeah, well, as I'm listening to this discussion and the way that you presented those words, and then the last little bit of Greek talking about giving, and that has directionality, and talking about that being in the Torah, making it something that's digestible. I was thinking about, all right, I'm going to go back to the narrative maybe I'll try to play Josh Davison's part for a second. Independent of the argument of when Job was written, the intentionality of the way the narrative is written is it's pre the giving of the Torah, right?
Mhm.
Supposed to be to the person that's living in the East where Abraham came from, whoever this Job is, right? And so when you read Job 28, when it's talking about wisdom, wisdom is completely unobtainable.
Mhm.
There's no access to it, none.
Yep.
And now when you're talking about Proverbs, and this is, so we're about to get into the giving of the Torah, but Proverbs is from within the covenantal people that were given wisdom by God. And this is an expansion of that with at least Proverbs 1-8 type thing, is that there is a way, and it is being revealed, but you really have to pay attention to it. It's not difficult, and it does come through multiple iterations of experience, playback, feedback, the thing that Spencer has talked about in multiple other podcasts that we've been on before. And that it's not something that can be taught. It is only something that can be learned, right? Okay. And
That's
now
a
you
good
get to
distinction. I like that.
yeah. And so now you're, in the way that Baruch is talking about it in book 3, it's referring back to the Torah. It's using all the same descriptors and the same type of, where is wisdom? Wisdom is in the Torah. Okay, so now we have that. We have something to point to that is something we couldn't get on our own, but God gave it to us and made it digestible.
Right. So let's talk about Torah for a second. What in the world are we talking about when we say the word Torah? Because the word Torah has about 50 definitions. So it is a very complicated word to get into. And there is a tendency to hyperfixate in Torah on the 10 commandments, and that is the totality of what Torah is, of the 10 thou shalt and thou shalt nots, which are arguable in and among themselves. But
Jesus might want a word there.
right. Absolutely.
Because
Definitely
he thinks
wants-
Deuteronomy 6 and Leviticus 19 are more important. But hey, what do I know?
That's right. So we have to first broaden our understanding of Torah. The what we call the law, and this is one of those things that modern translation and lexicons, and why I hate them so much, has done to the way we think about things, and scholars and biblical studies for a very long time equated Torah with law, with just the 10 commandments. So when you saw law, all you think is 10 commandments, and that is such a small fraction. And it's kind of, so think about it this way. So like the 10 commandments are like, this is the highest of the standards that God expects us to meet for loving him and our neighbor. How do we do that? These are the 10 ways that is done perfectly, is here. And then you've got the rest of what are the other 603 instructions in Torah, because the word itself just means instruction. It doesn't mean law. It means instruction. You got these 100 or 603 other instructions that are this means of, when this standard isn't met, how do we make it right with our neighbor or with God? Like, how do we fix and fill in that gap of where we didn't meet that standard? So there's ways that that's done. And part of the even bigger step back of Torah is the first five books of the Old Testament. And also one more big step back, all of the oral tradition connected to that. So you've got so many layers that have to be held in tension and kept in mind here with Torah. And when Baruch is using Torah, he is talking about that biggest outer layer. He's talking about all of it. He's talking about
The narrative.
10 commandments, the 613, the first five books, and the oral tradition, all of it together, because to them, this would not have been a conversation to have to define it this way. They just would have lived it this way. And we know that for a couple of things. And my favorite place to go for this is the Shema, right? Because the Shema, a lot of people in my evangelical background growing up, looked at the Shema as like, okay, here is the checklist that you have to teach your kids and make them memorize this checklist of stuff. And it turns into this, without meaning to, this meritorious list that goes with the promise of train up your child the way that you should go. I've heard it linked in so many sermons, I can't even tell you that's how you do this. Like,
And
you
it's
make them
not in the
memorize.
Greek.
It's not in the Greek. Yes. So, now you just threw me off.
Sorry.
It's okay.
The Shema.
Yeah, go back to the Shema.
Yes. So what the Shema is actually doing there, and this is really, I got to talk to a guy the other day, who's a Jewish converting to Orthodoxy now. We were having this really fun discussion about Shema, or the Shema, depending on which modern Jewish sect you belong to. Yeah, that was a new one to me. But that what that Shema really was about and what it did, because all of those things that are in there are encompassing of the ritualistic life of ancient Israel. So it talks about like when you come in and when you go out, and on your, when you lay down and when you get up, like all those things. And we kind of in our brains segment those into some kind of weird, I don't know exactly how to explain it, but really what that meant is you're supposed to saturate every waking moment of your day with God. God is supposed to be invited into and participated with and participating with you in every moment you're awake and alive. So that it was meant to train people's hearts to respond to God first. And that was the whole intention of the Shema, which was they were contemplating what? They were talking about Torah, and they were talking about the entirety of Torah. Yeah, you had to learn the 613, but it was more about what the weight of Torah was supposed to do, was to train people's hearts to God. And it didn't finish that. And Baruch shows us where this is going to be finished and who we're waiting for to finish that work of turning their hearts, which you see all this language in Baruch. I want to get ahead of ourselves, but that all goes back to where? To Torah. Goes back to the source of wisdom, the source of life, Torah. And it's really awesome. Like,
Wait a second, Amber. I thought Jesus came to end the law. I thought that the law was the problem and Jesus came to fix that problem. And thankfully we have Paul who tells us that now we're under grace because we don't have to worry about that anymore. And sarcasm.
I'll let Troy answer that one because he's giggling.
I'm giggling because I can't wait for your answer on that one. But no. What am I going to say to that?
Long answer? No.
No,
Short
it's
answer is
filled
go
to
ahead.
fullness, right? If your definition of abolish and filled to fullness are the same, I think you need a new dictionary. So, you think about the thing that one of the parables that Jesus talks about, putting new wine into old wineskins, right? There had been a wrong direction in the approach and understanding of Torah. So he's going, okay, we got to get back to the right wineskins, because if I pour the fullness into, it's going to burst it. You need to have the living understanding, the living incarnation of Torah to actually be able to handle the fullness of wisdom when wisdom is poured into it. So I think that's a much better way of looking at it than equating abolish and fulfilled when Jesus is specifically contrasting it. This goes back to the stupid comment I made a little bit earlier about how serious we actually do submit to Scripture.
Yeah.
And
And
I think,
why would the new wine burst the old wineskin? Because it would expand. And so, like, that's exactly the idea that that's the filling to the full. That's that's what the Torah does. in Christ is it doesn't stop, it doesn't end, it gets expanded.
Mhm.
It inflates. Yes.
And I think there's this misreading or misconception that people that I know of my background, that's all I can speak for because that's really all I know. They're like, point at, look, the law failed and that's why it had to be abolished because it didn't, like, okay, the Torah, okay, around here we're banishing the word law anyway, but the word Torah itself was never meant to permanently forgive sin. It was never meant to permanently ontologically change the heart. It was never meant to save anyone. That wasn't the purpose of Torah. Torah was meant to prepare everyone for the incarnation.
Yes.
That's Torah's job, was to get everybody ready for the Messiah.
I have maybe a mental picture. It was to draw people as close to God as possible so that in his presence they became capable of him drawing even nearer.
Yes.
This is the way in which God draws near to us and we draw near to him. And in that drawing near, there's the capacity within the human everything, like what it means to be human. I'm one of the things that I've done in my life is work in nuclear power. There is a place where uranium is quite thick in the rocks. I'll get back to it. I'll bring this around. So just give me a second. All right. Everybody's like, well, where are you going? Okay. I'll make it as quick as I possibly can. All right. So for hundreds, if not thousands of years, this village has made their homes out of these rocks that stayed warm in winter because it had a high, not until the last 100 years did we realize what that was, but it was uranium inside the rocks and it was producing radiation that kept them warm. Okay, they don't have cancer. Why? Because for hundreds, if not thousands of years, their bodies have become so equipped they can be in a radiation field high enough to produce heat on their bodies and not die. That's what the Torah is. It's the thing that draws close and allows for them to be tanned properly from going from hide that is, what do you call it? It's stiff and brittle to something that is soft and supple that can actually handle the fullness of wisdom being poured into it. So hopefully that's a good picture.
This reminds me a whole lot of, I think, my newest favorite miracle of Christ in the Gospels. The man by the pool of Bethesda. And he has to get himself as close as he can to the water, but he can't get in the water for healing. Christ has to finish the work. So Torah crawls you to the water, but Christ has to be the one finish the healing work there. That's what Torah does.
Mic drop.
Yeah. And also, like you were talking about it as covenantal. And so it makes me think when you're talking about that dual process of drawing near and dwelling within, which, by the way, is the core theme, dual theme of Leviticus, which is objectively the best book of the Bible. But nevertheless, I have to.
Shots fired.
Every single time I'm with Amber. But anyway, it makes me think of like a marriage, and it's funny because now my daughter is starting to ask questions about like how my wife and I met and like how we got to be from total strangers going to two different schools, and now we're one flesh and creating a family and sharing our whole life together. She and I are dwelling in very much like this kind of intimate communion and covenantal communion. But how do you get from this other thing of, because like she was looking at some of our old high school yearbook photos and she's like, where's mommy and yours, dad? I'm like, she wasn't there. How do you draw near to get to that space? And it's very much this like process of I have to accommodate myself to her, and she has to condescend very often to me. And I know it goes both ways. And so obviously the analogy breaks down when we're talking about gods and humans, but nevertheless, I'll just go with it for now. But yeah, like she had to accommodate a lot of me that was not her. And I had to shape and form myself into the kind of person who could fit with her. And now, but to be clear, again, as the counselor in me, not in such a way that it erased my identity, like this, not in such a way that it made me just a clone or a copy of her in any way. Like I had to very slowly kind of form and shape and learn the rules, the laws of, working with her. And actually that was a core, like conflict we had in our first couple of years of marriage. Was I wanted a spreadsheet. I wanted the equation. I wanted the input and the output. Do this, get this. Like, come on, what is wrong with you?
Write me your proverbs.
And the process of wisdom, of drawing near so that we can dwell within together, was very much that process of me learning. Yes, there are proverbial big picture rules you can follow. That is true. It is also true that there are many times that those proverbial big picture rules are worthless and vanity and wind. And it is also true that there is a mystery to her that I will never access ever. So like we got Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job all together.
Who is this that darkens wisdom without knowledge?
Which takes us back around to the book.
I'm just going to say I love my wife and then mute my mic.
Which takes us back to the book that's better than Leviticus, which is Ezekiel in chapter 36. And you get the new heart, where the old heart of stone is taken out and the new heart is put in, which Torah gets you to the place where you're ready to have the old heart taken out. But you need what's coming with the incarnation to replace the new heart there, which is why Ezekiel's better. But anyway,
so you don't have a transplant rejection.
Right.
Yeah, like you have to have the antibodies of Torah in your bloodstream, or so that when the heart transplant occurs, there is a compatibility there that will not cause death of the body.
Right. So we got to go back now to these Greek words and figure out, how does this work? So you've got Jobonic wisdom up here, unknowable, that only God can access. But he's promised that Torah is going to be the arrival of mature wisdom, which is, we'll see in the next episode, spoiler alert, is going to be the incarnation, right? So, but how do you get there? We have to have a path for that, because we have that Didymi sitting there saying there has to be a direction somehow. And Job and Baruch have both shown us, in Sirach and Wisdom of Solomon and Ecclesiastes and has all shown us we can't get there by ourselves. There's no way to do that. How do we do that? So in Baruch, this Jobonic wisdom is where the word Edoken comes in. God takes Solomonic wisdom and Edokens, puts a fence or a wall around Jobonic wisdom to contain it in a form we can interact with, Torah, and then gives it to Jacob and gives it to Israel. So and then 4:1 says that is Torah. So God makes a path to get that wisdom that's going to bring that change, that new heart that they're waiting for, because they're in these, the audience of Baruch is sitting in exile again, wondering what in the world, how do we get back? And Baruch says, Torah, the maturation of wisdom, is how we get back. And how do we get that? It is this taken Solomonic wisdom, walling in, containing in an interactable way, Jobonic wisdom, through Torah, that's going to become seen and lived among us, which is going to be a very familiar verse to us when we get to the next part. I don't want to steal the fun on that one, but it's very much this process that has to come down in a form that we can interact with. And Torah, we learn from the prophets and these wisdom literature books, and the Anagigus Schemena. Torah doesn't get us there, but it shows us who is coming to get us there and finish the rest of that path.
It points us to, right?
Yep.
Which sounds an awful lot like Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. Sounds an awful lot like Paul in Romans 3.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sounds an awful lot like John the Forerunner and interacting with Christ.
Right. And most of the book of Ephesians and Colossians 1, and like it's all over Pauline literature.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you mentioned John. You mentioned John the Forerunner, Troy. Like that's where we get like, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and Jesus is taking that from that. I'm trying to remember which. In Isaiah, which is the second best book. I'm sorry, Ezekiel. Sorry, not sorry. In Isaiah, when it talks about like prepare the way for the Lord in discussing the servant. So yes, like there's that servant language is, it is both John the Forerunner preparing the way, and it is the way himself. And both of those are the path of wisdom. And of course, John the Forerunner himself is not ignoring Torah. Like he's
fulfilling all righteousness.
Yeah, fulfilling. Yes, exactly. Fulfilling. Yeah.
Well, that's where I get to see Isaiah and raise you the Jeremiah corpus, because we get to see exactly how all that works. Because
foul.
That's where Baruch is part of the Jeremiah corpus. So you've got the book of Jeremiah and Lamentations and the epistle of Jeremiah and Baruch, all working together in this beautiful concert that points us very loudly and clearly to the Incarnation. Mm-hmm. So, and this is one of the fun things that I learned in this process and doing all this research. When you try to go back and you try to separate out and search for Baruch in the Church Fathers, you try to search for the Epistle of Jeremiah or Lamentations or any of these that we call the Jeremiah corpus, most of the time they refer to it just as Jeremiah. So in the early church's mind, this was one book. So if, which also causes problems if you reject Baruch, because the early church viewed it as Jeremiah. So, and then there's a whole nother conversation of when that all got separated out and how that works. But you really just see this clear picture that there is a path. God has a path. God prepared a way down. And then you also see a way back up when we get into the Incarnation and the totality of the Incarnation. And people forget to put the ascension in the Incarnation, because that kind of matters too, So you get this, you get down. How do we get down? We got down. How do we get back up? So then you get this other half of this, because otherwise you leave God stranded on earth, and that could be a problem as well.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think. Well, just kind of coming at it from, again, the evangelical perspective, like there's this allergic reaction to talking about working, about effort, about exerting, doing things. I've always heard the common phrase that all other religions say do, Christianity says done. And there is a sense and a degree to which that is true, in that all that we could not do has been done. Yes. But is that is necessary, but is that sufficient? And no, the answer is that we have to be shaped and formed into the likeness of Christ. And it makes me think actually of, and I know I'm getting far afield of the of Baruch, but it makes me think of 1 John 3:2. Beloved, we are now children of God. And then that whole language of children of God is all about image and likeness. That's Genesis through and through. Is the child is the one who bears the image of the Father, who is in the likeness of the Father. And what we will be has not yet been revealed. We know that when Christ appears, we will be like him, for we will see him as he is, which of course is the Jobonic wisdom of the my ears have heard you, but now my eyes have seen you. So it's in this sense of when we see the ineffable, when we come face to face with the one, and now I'm going to go to C.S. Lewis. So ding, when we cannot see him face to face until we have faces.
Yep.
We have to be conformed into the likeness of him. And that's when we will know him, because we will see him, because we will have the face that is his creation, not our own persona.
Yes. And it's not passive,
Prosophone.
right?
Yes.
This is not a passive shaping.
Yes.
This is a willful submission. And I think that to go with your rabbit trail of image and likeness, and that this is the way in which we participate in wisdom, is you even see this in Genesis 1:26 and 27, where let us make man in our image and in our likeness, let us make him. And he makes man in his image. In the image, he makes them both male and female. Likeness is missing in the activity that's done. All right. So this takes us all the way to what you just talked about in 1 John, that it's when we have his likeness that we'll be actually able to see him as he actually is that now you have this moment on the cross. It is finished. And yes, it's a quote from a psalm, but this is the first human that's lived from conception to death in the likeness of God. So the creation of man that he said from the very beginning is finished. And now our lives are hidden in his. And right. And he's going to conform us to that image, and he will complete the work that he started in us. And you have all these verses in the New Testament holding out hope that if I continue to submit, I will be given a face that can see his.
Yep. And I would recommend Father John Baird to anyone who is confused by that whole "it is finished" to telestai, because evangelical, I've always been taught that means paid in full, which of course is not at all. It's not anything we have any kind of linguistic or historical record of, but nevertheless, what it actually means is it is completed. It is brought to its fullness. And the it there is creation itself, specifically the sixth day of creation, the creation of humankind. So yes, Father John Baird is a great resource on that.
Yeah, his book on the Book of John and Pascha is fantastic. I read that a couple of times in my thesis research because I quoted it a lot in this chapter. And then I think the other thing there, I think I have a theory that I can't prove in a way that would get me a published paper or something like this, but I have this theory, pretty convinced that John was a fan of Baruch, because you'll see the way that he pulls in so much Baruch language, and it jumps, my brain automatically jumps to John chapter 14, and in verse 6, in his claim, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And he is, all three of those things show up in Baruch. So you've got the path down and up, I am that way. And truth, well, that is referred to in the source and the spring of wisdom, and and the life, which is also all three of those images show up in Baruch. I mean, it shows up all over the place too. And John's not just pulling from Baruch, but I think he was a fan, because you see it, so much of this language in here that shows up. And and I think they would have also been familiar with this, with the corpus of Jeremiah, enough to know that one of the claims in saying that is, I was the way down. He is definitely leaning in and pulling that thread out to be I am the way, making this claim, I am that path that was didomied as Torah is me.
Whoa. All right. So what you okay, one, I completely agree with you. John does so much work in all of his books doing this intertextuality thing on a higher level than most others. So it's pretty good. Maybe you can't prove it. Okay, but what you were just talking about is the descent and ascent, the vision of Jacob on the rock, of the ladder where the angels are ascending and descending on. And then you have Jesus who says, don't marvel at this. What if you see the angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man? He's claiming to be the descent all the way down and the ascent all the way back up. I am the way. Like,
And just
Cool.
to bring it back to the image and likeness and face to face, what does Jacob say? Jacob named the place Peniel, saying, "Indeed, I have seen God face to face, and yet my life was spared." It's almost like this whole ascent and descent depends on the capacity to see face to face, because how else can you ascend unless you have the face that can be in there? And of course, another example is Isaiah didn't yet have that face because he was a people of unclean lips, and not just like the ones who like did bad things, but the ones who were given the path, the way to be the ones with faces, and instead they did not do that. And
So now it's my turn to be sarcastic, but no one can see the face of God and live, right?
Yeah. So that's a whole different textual stream. We know that came in a later time when they were trying to just make it make sense, and so they just all put it together, and they just ignored the contradiction 9 verses later. So yeah, I'm going to take off my 19th century German hat now and put it down.
Well, this is where we get into this tangle of language of how do you talk about this path of preparation, this path of condescension. And it is prepared through this. I don't want to get too far into this because we're going to spoil the next one, but this path of divine condescension is this theory, the series of theophanies. And so, spoiler alert for evangelicals who might not be having the capacity to wrap their brains around this, because I didn't. So I've gone through this process, but those are all Christ stepping into time and interacting with man. So he is preparing his own way down, in a sense. And then you get this where it actually in John again, and why I think he's such a fan of Baruch and the language that's going on, because I think he's looking at that going, check this out.
Yeah. First John, or John 1 through 14.
And 1 through 18, because you got to tag the rest of the prologue in there. But
but then also, the angel of the Lord traveling with the people in the wilderness, where he joins them on the other side of the Sea of Reeds, and Yahweh tells them, listen to everything he says, do not disobey him, because my name is in it, because Hashem, because my name is in him. And then that he stays with them the entire time they're in, they're at Sinai, they're receiving the law, and then they, of course, they have the wilderness wanderings through Numbers, and then at the beginning of Joshua, that angel says, I'm out of here, guys. Like you didn't do that, and I cannot be among these people in this intimate of a way, in this present and personal kind of way, because you have not shaped yourself into that shape. And
what's
if
the
I were
term
to
that
stay
he
here,
uses?
it would break you.
Yes.
Yes.
I will break out among the people. It's this old, like the hide is not good for the new wine.
Yes. Yes. That the new wine of the angel of the Lord being in these wineskins of these people, it would burst them. It would, yeah.
There's
like,
a book.
I love you too much to let that happen. Yeah.
Right. There's a book by my second reader, Father Bogdan Bakur, called The Re-Envisioning of Scripture. And he goes through a lot of these theophanies and does a lot of really good work tying them to Christophany. We would name them Christophanies. Say these are actually appearances of Christ in time throughout the Old Testament. It's fantastic. It's super nerdy, so it's a little harder to read if you're not fluent in or at least good at looking up Greek. It's a little dense, but I had about memorized memorized that thing. I used it so much of it. It is a fantastic book that really makes a good case that Christ is the one stepping into all those time, and then what I did was kind of string those together as this progression of this path of condescension. So, which was a lot, but it was really fun to do. So, sorry, I get distracted. My ADHD is getting the better of me today. So, so stepping back and looking at all of what we've been talking about for the last little bit over an hour, we started with this divine gap, right? That is between God wisdom and our wisdom and our knowledge. Between man and God, there's this gap. And this really takes me back in my brain to Deuteronomy 30, right? And which is, with that face, Spencer, I'm going to let you talk about Deuteronomy 30 because that's a fun one. Deuteronomy chapter 30 really gets into, this is that fun blessings and cursings, the blessings of repentance, like the preparation, but the word is very near you, in your mouth, in your heart, in your hands, that we may do. This is how do we participate, right? Because this is happening at Sinai, and Baruch chapter 3 and part of chapter 2 is a retelling of Sinai. So you get this retelling of Sinai, and then you get more prayers of confession and the gap of wisdom. And how do we start this path of dissension, divine condescension, to get this rescue and relief from exile? Because we're back in Egypt again. And Deuteronomy 30 comes in here because this commandment that I command you today is not burdensome for you, nor is it far off. And then,
Yes. No, oh boy, so many things to say. No, you're 100% correct. Like, so we have to kind of zoom out a little bit and look at Deuteronomy as a whole. Like, Deuteronomy is Moses's like final sermon right before the people go into the land, which is itself the ending of an exile of sorts, of an entire generation perishes in the wilderness because they did not have faith, because they were not faithful, because they did not follow God's, Torah. And so the exile in that context, as Moses is saying that, the exile is ready to end. It's almost done. And Moses is telling the people, look, this is actually not that hard, which, again, evangelicalism, I'm sorry, I have heard that so many times. The purpose of the law was to teach them that they could not follow the law, that they could not, achieve salvation, by any means other than, a divine gift of grace. And I hope it's clear from everything you said, talking about giving, that that's exactly what we're still saying. We're still saying that salvation is impossible through the Torah of God given at Sinai, and which is eminently clear. If you read two chapters earlier in Deuteronomy 28, when it talks about the blessing and curses, it is never promising eternal life. Not once. It never says, follow these things and you will have the life of the age to come. It always
hang on,
says you will
Spencer.
have life in the land.
It sounds like you're preaching on the box of faith alone here, that no works allowed. There's no merit in all of this. Is that what you're saying?
Oh boy. I literally heard from the pulpit at my church, salvation is by works, just not your works.
Yeah.
That whole idea of merit, that we have to merit salvation. That is the whole purpose of the Torah, is to give us the merit rules. And if we have to follow the merit rules. And if they were not followed, then everybody would be damned for all eternity. But thankfully, someone has come in, Jesus, theoretically, who does follow them all perfectly, and his merit is then applied to us. And now we got double imputation going on and everything else like that. I'm just going to say, without getting too derailed, that is wildly incorrect. And again, going back to the text of the Torah itself, that Deuteronomy 28, Leviticus 26, the curses, the blessings of the law of Torah, of the Mosaic covenant, were always about life in the land. They were not about the life of the age to come, the Zoe Ionios, the eternal life. And so that was never the promise. And that's why when Moses tells the people, look, guys, this is not that hard. He's not doing a juke of some sort. Right. He's not telling them something with proleptic, prophetic, promising, looking millennia down the line to Jesus. He's saying, no, it really is not that hard. Like,
he's not playing a joke on them. It's not.
No.
The conversation that God has with Cain is another one of those that you could just point out and go, right. Okay, somehow right. I'm missing something if I hold to what you just described. It's God talks to Cain and says, look, if you do what is right, your countenance will be lifted up. Real simple. Mm-hmm. If you continue to do what is wrong, well, sin is a demon that wants to pounce on you, rape you, and you should master it. All right. So is he picking on Cain, or is he actually telling the truth? Right. So the same thing goes with the Torah. And like you said, in the Deuteronomy 28, I set before you life and death, blessing and a curse. Choose life that you may live. You're right. It's not a promise of eternal salvation or the life of the age to come, because that age isn't present yet. There is still some prep that needs to go on. That's what the Torah is that preparation of humanity to get to that point. So yeah, that whole, it's there was a meme by one of our mutual friends. It's the idea of the ancient Roman Catholic Church and the present Roman Catholic Church say it's by the merits of Christ and the saints that we obtain salvation. Protestants, no, it's only Christ works that merit our salvation. And the East is going, you think it's about merit? Like, no.
Yeah. Yeah. It's about ontology, which goes back to everything you were talking about, Amber, about Torah, about all we were talking about image and likeness. It is all about shaping a people into maturing human nature, taking the human creature, the Adam, from the Adamah, and infusing his Adamah with nefesh, infusing his Adamah with ruach, which then makes him into a nefesh. And that's exactly why Paul in 1 Corinthians later on uses that parallel of, the first Adam became a living being. Well, Christ became a life-giving spirit. Like, that is the completion, and that is the telos of the entire project of Israel, of Adam, of all of it. And now I'm going to go back to what you were saying with Deuteronomy 30, when you said, like, this word is not too hard for you. It is near you, in your mouth and in your heart. Where else do we see that pop up in the New Testament? Romans 10. And where else do we see the Christ is the end of the law? No, Christ is the telos of the law. Christ is the completion of the law. Of the Torah. He is the fulfillment of Torah. And how do we know, and in what way do we interpret that? In the Deuteronomy 30 way. He is not the completion of it because no one could fulfill it, but he came to fulfill it, and thankfully it's his merit that matters. He is the completion of it in this ontological sense, in this filling to the full the vessel of being made a nefesh, so that we can not just be a nefesh, but a life-giving spirit.
We have this treasure in earthen vessels, so that the power that's worked through us can be shown to be from God and not from ourselves. God, come on.
Yes.
My fractal patterns, speaking my language.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So that's my little mini sermon on Deuteronomy 30. I'm done.
I knew you would have one because you
Yeah,
have
I do.
some really good. I'm still waiting for the whiteboard one of these days. That's one of my favorites. Spencer's whiteboards are like legendary. See, here we go. Spencer's whiteboard.
Not enough color.
I have other things on it right now, but it's almost always at hand at all times.
Needs more color in your whiteboards. Again, we're back to this. Anyway,
I can't hear you, Amber.
What?
Now you're back. Now you're back.
Okay. Yeah, all right. Just totally threw me off here. I have to collect my brain for a second here. All right. So I don't even know where I'm going from here at this point. Where were we at? We were talking about Torah. All right.
Yes.
So divine condescension, crossing the vertical gap. Okay. So we start with the pattern. We start with, we're back in exile. We're back where we were when we started before we were taken out of Egypt. We get taken out of Egypt and we get to eventually the promised land through a very long and circuitous route, which tends to be a pattern that starts in Genesis, that humans are supposed to go the easy, straight way and then end up taking detours and decide to turn a 12-mile trip into a 47,000-mile trip because we keep taking the detour and going the long way around, right?
Yeah.
So
the shortcut is always the long way.
Usually everyone we've all had those experiences. We're like, I'm going to take the shortcut. And then you're like, why did I do that? Because now I'm lost, and an hour later, my kids are mad because they're hungry. So why in the world did I do that? That's crazy, right? And then we get to setting the stage for the next part, because it really is I think a hard concept if you take these books, these Anagigna Skolmena books, out of your biblical narrative to bridge that gap. You end in depending on where you end your Old Testament, in which order you end it in. Okay, you could end it either in with what's called Tanakh primacy, right? We're going to go ahead and jump into this because this is fun. You could end this in Tanakh primacy, which ends in Chronicles and the Decree of Cyrus. And that's always going to send you back to the land, right? And this is going to be a setup for episode 4, maybe 5. I don't know, depending on how long it takes us to get through the Incarnation.
Back to the land and a stone temple.
Back to the land and a stone building, all right? Or if you end it with in
Greek
Malachi, if you end in Malachi, you've got back to that, but it's still like you got bad shepherds and the wheels falling off, which doesn't really give you anything to look forward to. You're still looking back at what's going wrong with the temple and what's happening there. It still points you back to the temple.
All right, hold on before you reveal the other option. You see both of those types of people that interact with Jesus in the New Testament.
Yep.
Right? You have the disciples pointing to the stone temple, look at the beautiful temple, and him rejecting that. And you have people that are the different sects of Judaism during that time, and the call of the Pharisees to repentance. Like, we got this, we were turned into exile. We don't have rulership over the land. Therefore, we did that through disobedience. Therefore, it must be in perfect obedience that we get back out of exile and take over the land. So you're interacting with those two endings, whether it's the return from exile and a stone temple, or whether it's the how do we deal with all these false shepherds that keep leading us astray. All right, now, and Jesus interacts with both of those and says that's not it. So now, what's this third one?
And so the third one is when you end it with the major prophet corpus. So Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel. Then you end up with this very clear picture of the Son of Man coming on the clouds, of the Torah walking among us, of the one who heals and saves together, because healing and salvation is another one of those things like works and law. You can't pull them apart, right? They're a unit together. And you just, there's the uncontainable, crazy vision of Ezekiel 1, and this uncontainable God takes this path down, and now we're waiting for that vision to come on the clouds like in Daniel. So you have a very clear picture of who Christ is going to be, which is why every time you see this, that you see references in the Gospels to Daniel and Isaiah, the Pharisees freak out because they know exactly what's going on there, because they know the Anagignoskomena. And they know exactly what's going on with all of those signposts with giant neon unmistakable signs of who Christ really is, and they don't like it.
Yeah. He's
at all.
Claiming to be the wisdom of God, and the wisdom of God is God. How are you claiming that? Right?
Yeah.
You are a man. How do you make yourself out to be God? And wow, that's pretty crazy. That's awesome.
Yeah.
How many times are we going to touch the next episode in this episode?
I know, it's so hard to stay out of.
Stay tuned.
You can't not get into, when you're talking about wisdom, you can't not get into the incarnation. It's so hard to stay away from it, just because it's one of those things you can't pull it. You can't really pull it out. But I think
it's attached to everything. So yeah,
it is. It saturates everything. And I think what's happening. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Spencer.
Well, I was just going to say, it's because wisdom itself is an incarnational reality. Like, there's a spiritual component. There is the instruction. There is the mental abstractions, the quote unquote rules, the commands. Like, there is that kind of stuff. And that is one piece of the puzzle. And then there is the actual embodiment of those of those things, of those rules, those there's and the coming together of the two is the walking out, is the halach, the halakha, the way, the path that you have to walk. And it was so fascinating when you were talking about that, like, the long way around or the straight and narrow path. I just can't, it hit me how often I have heard the straight and narrow as being this like bad thing, as being like either exclusionary because it keeps people out, or as being straight and narrow because it's so hard to stay on and you got to like really kind of do this like little balancing act to keep from falling off. when really it was like, guys, this is the easy path. And it makes me think of, and now I am going to quote Jeremiah, the Jeremiah 17, the heart is achov, is akov, which is normally translated as like deceitful or wicked or something, but it really means like this dark, crooked, winding, full of potholes, broken, littered with junk path. And then he goes, and the heart is akov, and who can know it? And then it says, and God can know it. God's the one who searches that space, and he sees the path within it. And that makes me think of also John the Forerunner, and I have come to make straight the paths. So like that was the path that Israel and humanity was on, was this akov path. And now if you end the canonical narrative with like a Jeremiah, you get that message of, wow, the heart is akov. Oh, good. Jeremiah 31 and 33. Good news is I will give you a new heart, one that is straight and narrow.
Yes, and brings in Ezekiel. And yes, so there's lots of play there. And it one of these days I'm going to get you to say it. So it takes us back again to Genesis, and because we've had done several episodes, and Spencer, now you've talked about this several times on different episodes about the fall. And I'm going to go here because it's my channel and I can. So this idea and this concept that the tree of Tov and Ra was some sort of setup, pass-fail test that they were supposed to fail, right? And it was this impossible choice that God set up that this concept gets mirrored in what people think Torah does as well, which is this impossible setup of a test they were meant and destined to fail, which are both incorrect. And the reason why is the incarnation. And you see this idea that because of the incarnation was always plan A, that Adam and Eve weren't ready to take what they took. And because of that, they took the natural maturation process that they were supposed to have gone through, but that they chose to go the long way. And then they keep choosing to go the long way. And we keep choosing to go the long way.
Man, that's like experiencing a traumatic event earlier than you can process it. It stunts growth.
Yep. And people, I wrestled with this myself. And now, you hear, outside of Orthodox theology, you hear a lot of opining about how come these stupid hard-headed Israelites couldn't get the point. Well, that's not exactly what it is. It's just freely choosing to take the long way around. Like if you're, you could make this easy on yourself because God keeps giving them all these things to get them back on the shorter path. And we keep going, no, I think I know better than you. I'll just do it this way instead.
That pattern plays out so often in scripture, right? You've got the fall narrative. This was the other reason why like original sin just kind of falls flat for me, is the idea that like how many times is that narrative played out in scripture where there is, here's what God intends to do. It's not complete yet. There is a shortcut that is noted, and then something is taken and consumed, and then there's consequences that actually make it take longer to reach the thing that was intended by God to begin with. So, start with the earliest one with the fall. You have the serpent offering the thing that's missing in humanity, the likeness, which requires a life lived, right? So they're in the image. He said he's going to make them in his likeness. They're not ready for the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because this goes into the idea of, are we experiencing it through God as he's going, okay, I have wisdom, you don't yet. you're mature enough to handle this. You're
Yeah.
mature enough to handle this. So you're experiencing lack through God's offering of it, right? The first not good is it's not good for man to be alone. God's the one that brings that to humanity. So he's intending to mature them to likeness. And it seems like it's the long way because it's God's timing and not ours. The serpent comes by and says, oh, he's just keeping this from you because he knows on the day that you eat of it, you will be like God. And even God's response afterwards, well, they're now like us, but it's like the inverse. And if we let him reach out and touch the tree of life, he's going to be stuck in this. So, all right, out of the garden, exile. Let me keep the way of wisdom guarded.
Mhm.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So cool. All right. So now you can see that pattern with.
Well,
go ahead.
The exact same word is used there to describe in the Greek, in the Septuagint, to describe what the cherubim does. Is he sits there and swings the sword, the flaming sword, to guard the way.
The way.
Mhm.
Yep.
Same Greek word as when Jesus says, "I am the way."
The way. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you see this pattern play out
Mhm.
through Abraham 3 times over when he's promised, I'm going to make you the father of many nations. But he already knows that Sarah is can't have kids. So what does he do? He takes along Lot, his brother's son, because Lot can inherit from him. And God's like, I'm going to bless Lot, and I'm going to bless him so much that you guys actually have to separate. No, Abraham, I'm going to reiterate the promise. You'll be the father of many nations. Sarah's like, but I can't do it. Here, take my servant, right? There's the consequences of trying to take the shortcut. Instead of just trusting and obeying. Leave your household, all of your household and all of your household's gods, and you go to the place I will show you, and I'll make you the father of many nations. Come along, Lot. Right? So you see these fall narratives. You see it with David and Bathsheba. You see it across many, 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 many narratives where we stumble because we see an apparent shortcut that actually makes it the long way around. So now you get to Christ and his temptation with Satan. If you bow to me, I will give you all the nations. Were the nations already promised to the coming Son of Man? Yes. Satan is offering a shortcut, but it's not the shortcut. It would be way longer. But God's way is going to be harder. Right? But it's near.
Yep.
Man.
Yep.
I love that one.
And God will, and I think it's very easy to look at that long way around with the Israelites and exile and everything else and say, like, this is either an unmitigated good or an unmitigated evil. So like sometimes it's described as like, oh, there's the Felix Felicis, the fortunate fall idea that like, oh, because it was redemptive, because it was for a redemptive purpose, that makes it all okay. That makes it all a good thing. And that, again, to go back to the whole spiritual trauma thing, is really, really damaging. To look at people and say, okay, this happened for a good, therefore it is a good. It's like, no, this was an evil. This was wrong. This was bad. Yes. And it never should have happened. And it was not the design to happen that way. But and even though God will work good out of it, it is not itself a good. It is an evil. And I think it's really important that we kind of like name that. But then again, it's not wholly an evil either, because God will work good out of it. It is like we do not mourn as those who have no hope. Like that, we still mourn because it is an evil. It is not the way it's supposed to be. There is a genuine loss, but we also have hope. And again, here's now that dialectic being held in tension, two realities side by side. Yes, it is evil. Yes, God will bring good out of it. Neither one swallows up the other. They are both true at the same time. And I just think it's so important that we look at, like, whether it's the garden or Abraham and Sarah or the exile in Babylon, and all those things, and look at that, and that is the process of incarnation, when the mistakes of humanity get worked into the way, the path.
Mhm.
So
This is probably a side rabbit trail here, but it reminds me of something we were talking about. I'm sorry. I just, it just, my brain just goes there and it's fun. So we were talking about in catechism class the other day about this idea of, because we were talking about the incarnation, that all of these falls, all of these diversions are because the introduction of not letting things mature to the full, being able to hold the wisdom of the tree in the garden, that it introduced an unnatural element into something that was naturally created. So we were created for the short path to wisdom, and we were chose to go the unnatural path. But that didn't make any of us or creation unnatural. It made sin introducing an unnatural element into the math of the choices that we make. And so it is getting back to the natural path. And it's it's just, didn't think about it like, actually, no, I don't want to go too much further down that rabbit hole.
Oh, man, I was just getting excited. I'm about to bring a whole chapter of James into that one.
Well, okay. I could also, bring in there just to reiterate that this reading of the tree of knowing is ancient, and the best way to read that story is Gregory of Nazianzus, or Saint Gregory the Theologian, in his Oration 38, which is titled On the Theophany. Exactly what we've been talking about. He talks about how the tree of knowledge, and he says, but it would have been good if partaken of at the proper time. For the tree was, according to my theory, contemplation, which is theoria, upon which it is only safe for those who have reached maturity of habit to enter. But it is not good for those who are still somewhat simple and greedy in their habit, just as solid food is not good for those who are yet tender, who have need of milk. And so I know, like, very often we hear that, like, solid food and milk is like, as if milk is a bad thing, or once we eat solid food, then we just get rid of milk. It's like, no, we do both. But we also don't do the solid food before we're ready to partake of it, because we'll choke and die, and our bodies can't digest it, all those kind of things. And so that is how I am reading this whole narrative of, that is why the incarnation was always plan A, was to make the human nefesh capable, to kind of lead them slowly along with milk until the time where they could receive the solid food of theoria, to be fully unified to the divine nature. So
yeah, and I think I was kind of mentally going a different direction with that, but that totally works. So,
okay, all right.
So I'm like, hey, it works, and it's not, like that totally works. But I was just thinking, because I think in the conversation and the dialogue around wisdom, and how this is now, because we hold it in this Western, like we talked about at the beginning, this Western dichotomy of, subjective and objective, and not having the participatory in the middle that holds that together, right? That in this, I think in this concept, and what they were talking about the other day, that we tend to think that after the fall, that's natural for us. So sin is natural for us to participate in, because we're fallen and the world is fallen and we're corrupt and everything is bad. But sin and those soul wounds are not natural. We're not meant for those. We're not made for those. We're not made to contain those. And so thinking about the point that I made on the episode I did with Sean yesterday, thinking about, like, to us, miracles people think are like this unnatural thing. Like you get, like, a miracle happens and it's an unnatural event. But, to make that point, if it's actually an unnatural thing, if you take someone with brain cancer and it's a miracle, if it's unnatural, you're going to remove the brain and they're going to continue to walk around just fine, like there's nothing wrong with them. But it is removing the part that's unnatural, which is the tumor, to restore it back to the natural. So in healing, and ultimately in incarnation and healing in Christ, is removing that sin damage that is unnatural to restore us back to the natural state in which we were created.
All right. Are you ready for that James passage now?
Drop it. Yep.
All
Drop
right.
it.
So keep everything that we've said in mind, because James puts them all in tension. So this should, sorry. I forgot where I started. Therefore, putting aside all filthiness and all the remains of wickedness and humility, receive the word implanted, which is able to save your souls. But prove yourselves doers of the word and not merely hearers who delude themselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man who looks at his natural face in a mirror. For once he has looked at himself and gone away, he has immediately forgotten what kind of person he was. But one who looks intently at the perfect law, Torah, the law of liberty, and abides by it, not having become a forgetful hearer, but an effectual doer, this man will be blessed in what he does. Okay, so to go back to the natural versus normal, right? It is normal for you to run into sinful images of God. It is not natural. Right. The one thing that I love talking about, I worked in landscaping when I was, 18, 19 as a summer job. And one of the things that gets planted all over here in Houston are pear trees that have been genetically modified to not produce any pears. So they produce the same leaves. They produce the same colors in the fall. They produce the beautiful white flowers in the spring. They do not produce any pears. So in Houston, it is normal to see a fruitless pear tree. It's not natural. And what Christ is doing, and this is what is the natural face of man, the image and likeness of God. Hold on. I'm going to see if I can take this off without getting too much. Right? The natural face of man, like Paul talks about, that we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. The natural face of man is the image of God. So how do I have access to that natural image? Well, I have to continue to peer into the law of liberty. So who's the law? I have to continue to peer and let the implanted word, and that would be uppercase word, save my soul. All of that is built into this incarnational idea that you see in Baruch. And then, since we're talking about all the wisdom and the different types of wisdom, the James 3 passage is talking about there's a wisdom from above that has descended, and there's a wisdom that didn't descend, that it's something that is twisted and tormented from here. Well, maybe that wisdom should be uppercased.
I think that is possibly an allusion to Baruch there in James as well. I mean, I'd have to research that some more, but sounds a lot like it to me.
Yep.
And there's some good stuff. Anyway, so to kind of start getting to where we're heading towards wrapping this up, because we're getting close to the 2-hour mark here. I think that the important thing in the wisdom discussion is that we kind of have to hold the whole thing gently. We can't hold on too tightly to one definition of wisdom or to one way that wisdom works, because there are so many expressions and ways to participate and interact with wisdom. And some of it is not human, some of it is divine, and we cannot define the divine. So we have to be very ginger and open-handed when we're interacting with wisdom.
Yes. Man, there's so much there. Right. So are we creatures of dust or creatures of spirit?
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's both. And you're right. You can't grasp just one. You can't be, I'm imprisoned in this body of flesh. I cannot wait to be the orb. Right. And it's not the other thing that there is no spirit. There is only now. So eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Both of those are ditches on either side of this. And you have to have those two things in tension, that there's something that I cannot explain, but through experiencing it, I can start seeing it face to face. Sorry.
Yeah.
Bring another Till We Have Faces reference.
Yeah. Oh boy. It makes me think of, like, again, to go back to Proverbs, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
It is the beginning place. It is where we start. And then you end in John saying perfect love casts out fear. Now, it's the same kind of concept there, but it's not saying it erases all fear completely, because John frequently says, fear the Lord, fear the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
It's just saying that, like, it takes that fear of the Lord that we had at the beginning in the milk, and it adds meat to the milk and makes it so that we have a full meal going on here. And it makes me think of Dr. Timothy Petitsis was doing an interview where he put out a little, like, 3-part way of approaching these things that I think is really, really helpful when we kind of look at Torah and understanding how we're supposed to relate to these quote unquote laws or rules, or all the instruction of God, the instruction in shaping us into a certain form so that we can then receive the wisdom of God. He talked about it in the context of, like, there are 3 things. You could do it as you could basically come at it as if you are a god, come at it as if you are a servant or a slave, or you could come at it as if you are a son. And you could walk up to those things, and we do this very often with the Bible, where we say, I'm going to stand in judgment of these particular things because I don't understand it. It doesn't fit into my pattern and paradigm. Therefore, I am going to set myself up as a god above these things. Or we come in and we say, no, I just must submit to everything. I must, surrender all of my reason, all of my will, everything. And the Bible says it, I believe it, that settles it. And that's that servant mentality, or that slave mentality. And then we have sons, which is, the perfect law of liberty, the perfect nomos of liberty. And it is not saying that, like, the Torah at Sinai was restrictive and was enslaving everybody in these shackles of ritual or whatever else it is. It's just saying that, like, this is the progression of wisdom. We have to start off with just
a tutor,
learning. Yes, exactly. Yeah, we have to start off with teaching, to go back to your distinction you made earlier, Troy, with being taught, being instructed. And then we learn and we develop, like, a sixth sense of, okay, now I just know. Like, this goes back to Jesus talking about in John 10, my sheep hear my voice and they know me because they've listened to my voice, because they've heard my voice all over and over and over. And it's not that they got a certain set of decibel levels and a certain frequency, and now the sheep know, in this kind of spreadsheet format, what Jesus' voice sounds like. It's like, no, they have lived with him. They have drawn near to him. And because of that, he is able to then dwell with them. It's that same type. That's what approaching wisdom, approaching Torah, approaching all these things as a son looks like. It's not complete freedom. I can do whatever I want, God's. It's not complete surrender of all of everything about me and all my reason and all my rationality. That's the slaves. This is sonship. So
And I think I would build on that a little bit with the conversation that I just had earlier today, talking about how all of this is not, it all requires us to freely choose to participate.
Bingo.
Like,
That's the
it's very
though.
much the free will participation. It is not demanded, because if you demand it, you either become the tyrant that you're being under, or you become the slave of the tyrant. And it very much is the cooperation of the free choice to do so, and that none of this is coerced. None of this is, all of those falls were a result of a free will choice.
Yes.
And
so is the repair from that.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And the participation in wisdom and learning is a choice. And the participation in the incarnation is a choice. And I think how liberating that can be when you grow up in either the slave or the tyrant ditches of theology. That you don't even have to be there.
Yeah.
You can get up, like somebody said to me earlier today, at any point you can get up and walk out of the room.
Yep.
We have that freedom of choice, and we have the freedom to walk in that room. And so it's just a beautiful thing. And wisdom is learning how to wisely use that free choice that we have.
I'd want to add a little bit too. I don't think that there is a slave or tyrant separation. I think that approach creates tyrant slaves, like the wicked servant in the parable. A good king, but he doesn't understand, and so he becomes the tyrant to another slave. Right? That's at the, what is it? To the pure, I will show myself pure. To the, and it goes down it, but there's that one, to the wicked I will show myself torturous, and the parables of those with talents, right? I knew that you harvested where you did not plant. I knew that you did these things. Oh, you did you? Okay, well then I'll take what I gave you and I will give it to the person that was faithful with what was more. So there's this. So to add, you become what you worship, and so you have the tyrant God the Father, and you have the servant God the Son, and so you become a tyrant slave instead of seeing them united in their efforts to descend and get all of humanity and ascend with us.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, because again, that takes us out of that unnecessary binary either or mentality, because in some way in that mind you are either the tyrant or the slave. You are a tyrant to someone and a slave to someone else.
Well, and that's why I like that sonship model as being the way to go, because a son will do all the good things of both and will avoid the pitfalls of both. A son will be obedient like a servant or a slave. A son will also know when they have the freedom to, diverge according to the inheritance they have been promised. They have that freedom as well, but they also will not use that freedom to lord it over others, or to do or to just make their own path that diverges from the Father. But yes, that's the dialectical tension being held together is sonship.
Oh my gosh, there's a direct story in the Gospels that talk about Jesus dealing with do I have to pay the temple tax? Do sons have to pay the king? Do the sons of the king have to pay taxes? But to not give offense, go fishing and pull that piece of gold out. It's so that's really good. I like that.
Yep.
This has been a fantastic episode, I think, and I have had a lot of fun with it. There's a lot to mine in the wisdom conversation in wisdom literature, and how that directly involves the narrative of the Incarnation, because it really is, the Incarnation is the maturation of wisdom becoming interactable.
Yes.
And
United with.
the Logos becomes flesh and tabernacles. Like, I love the language. We're going to nerd out on the next one. Again, we're going to talk about the next one. But
we've been talking about the next one the whole time. Like, there's not much. There's not much surprise coming.
Yeah.
Well, no, but at least, we've left enough hints that people will follow that one a lot easier, I think, because that's a hard one. Like, I can tell you this from personal experience. I spent 5 months writing the chapter on the Incarnation. And the only thing I know is I know nothing about the Incarnation. And I got deep into the weeds, and I had to quickly master as much as my poor little brain could absorb St. John of Damascus and St. Maximus the Confessor and St. Gregory of Palamas. And that's not where you start patristics.
Talk about swimming in the deep end. Holy buckets.
Yes. And so, yes. And I poor Troy had so many hours of complaining about what in the heck is going on around here.
Like, hold on.
I'm reading through Maximus's works right now, and whoa. They are heavy. Like, I frequently have to go, okay, I know what was said here was a lot, but I got to go back and reread this because.
And I'm going back through the cosmic. What is it? The cosmic view of the Incarnation, or whatever the one that's
Cosmic
called.
Mystery of Christ.
Yes, that one.
Yes.
And I'm going back through that now, and I'm like, okay. And I'm gonna have to go back in because I'm just listening through it this time. I'm not like reading it to try to mine what I need out of it for my, because I quoted St. Maximus pretty heavily in that chapter, and Palamas in the next one. But I got trying to get my head around this, and I can explain a lot of trying to make sense of what's in Baruch and how that relates to what's in John and the intertextuality there. But that doesn't actually mean that I understand it. It is a mystery that we will never be able to get our heads around. Yes. How in the world does all that work? And, but to be able to enter into the conversation, because steering away from a topic that we cannot understand just breeds ignorance. And to even just try to have the conversation, to sit down and say, wisdom is a completely confusing thing that, okay, well, Baruch is takes us right to the deep end of wisdom and how that interacts with the Incarnation, because everything always goes back to the Incarnation, and our whole existence and every point of reference should be pointing us back into the Incarnation when we're picking stuff at the grocery store or reading any book of the Bible or listening to anybody's podcast on YouTube or trying to decide how frustrated you're going to get with the driver in traffic. All of it points back to the Incarnation. Like, it really does. But it's one of those mysteries that it's really hard to get your head around, that we can never fully get our heads around. But the more we participate with the Incarnation and experience it in an embodied way, makes it participatory in a way that our souls understand, that our minds can't, I think. So, all right. Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, if that really freaks you out, why is the church called the body of Christ?
Right. Very true. All right, so we're going to wrap this up. So, Spencer, what is one thing that you would like people to take away from all of this?
Whew. In this life, there is no easy path. There are no shortcuts. There is no short and follow these 5 simple steps or one weird trick to be able to get to whatever we want. I know we as American capitalist, consumerist, individualist people, we really desperately want that. And I cannot tell you how many times I've sat in the counseling office across from someone. They're like, I'm trying to heal from trauma. And I almost worry that I scare people away sometimes, because I say, great, strap yourself in. This is going to be a long road. And it will take a ton of work, and it will cause, and you will have to face a lot of pain. And frankly, it'll get worse before it gets better. And that is absolutely true every single time. There is no shortcut to wisdom. That was exactly the mistake of the garden, is reaching out and seizing the tree of knowing before they were ready, before they could handle it, and before they were fully shaped into a particular likeness. And yeah, we just need to embrace the long way around.
All right, Troy, what is your one thing you want people to take away from this?
Spencer stole all my points. No, I've been thinking about it since you asked him. Like, don't be tempted by the shortcuts. They are tempting because they're wrapped in what God's already promised. And sometimes almost every time God is silent when it's presented. Are you going to continue to trust? Are you going to continue to wait? Because it is the longer way around, but the reward is not as far as you think, right? Just like Jesus said, the kingdom is at hand, or it's not that far from you. What does it say when he's talking back to Deuteronomy 30? It's not far from you. It's right. It's in your hearts and on your lips. This is not that far. So hold out. Do it God's way. Do it in God's timing. Don't take the shortcuts.
I think I would say that when in conversations and in experiences and the various places that we end up, and theologies and church traditions that premises anything fast and instant should definitely cause you pause, because that is not the order that everything was created to follow. And so I would just definitely be wary, because the original path was never an instant path. It still took a journey. And so anyone that promises you in any theology or anything that you're hearing that promises you instant should always raise a red flag. So that's not the natural way. That's the unnatural way, and should be definitely treated with caution. So, all right, gentlemen, this has been a lot of fun. Spencer, what is up over at Trauma Informed Church Kid, and what can we look forward to, and what's going on over there?
Sure. We are diving into sacrifices. I am I have already recorded, and I am editing my first of 2 episodes on sacrifices. The first one is entirely on non-atoning sacrifices. And then the next one will be on atoning sacrifices. Then after that, we're going to be talking about redemption and ransom and jubilee all together, wrapped up into one. And then also after that, we'll be talking about curses. So yeah, lots of really light and simple and easy topics.
All right, everybody, if you haven't gone over and checked out Trauma Informed Church Kid, please do so. I recommend it to people all the time. Send people his way all the time. Go watch it. Troy, what are you up to on the interwebs these days? You're kind of all over the place.
Yeah. I'm a guest, so I'm at people's disposal. I just love having conversations with really incredible people that are nerding out in something that I like to nerd out on. So,
but not disposable.
Thank you. So yeah, the last, I don't have anything planned after this one, but that doesn't mean there isn't going to be something that's coming up. A couple days ago, I did one with Sean. There is one getting released today.
Right now, it's going right now, actually.
Yeah, it's going right now. So while we're recording this, the one that I previously recorded is being released, talking about the gospel in the stars, or the Mazzaroth, and its overlap with Revelation. So it's a really cool, I love looking at the stars. I love, looking for constellations and what are the stories behind it, and then going, wait a second, there's a pattern here that looks very familiar, and then starting to see that come out in scripture, not as stars correcting scripture, but scripture. The Psalms are full of it, but Psalm 19 is a good one to go off of, but I can say it fairly quickly, is that God placed the stars and knows them all by name. If he's the one that did that, maybe there's a message there. And so this next episode is talking about how Revelation uses, when you get to Revelation 12, I saw a great sign in the heavens. Can we actually take that literally? Mm-hmm. That he actually saw the sign in the heavens, and then God is giving him the proper understanding of it, and that's what he's giving us. So anyways, hopefully that, I don't know, that interests somebody.
Yep. Well, hopefully we would definitely be having you as a regular around here, because you've already told me you'll come do the stars thing on this channel, because I think everybody would really love it, and that would be really awesome. So, and we've got at least 2 more Baruch episodes to go. Yep. That's a soft number.
As many. ADHD brain. Sorry.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much fun as we have having these conversations, that people do enjoy watching them. And, but, I think this is another one of those perfect examples that, there is a lot of beauty in the mystery of Scripture. And if we just take a step back and look at the bigger picture and dig into a little bit of the connections that might not always be obvious at first, and explore territory that's unfamiliar, that mystery just gets bigger and more beautiful the longer that we explore that territory and those mysteries. So thanks again, guys, for coming. That was a lot of fun and a great conversation, and we will see all of you in the next one.